How many snaps did they run in the 14 personnel?
That's only for us.
100% of the snaps.
What is going on, everybody, and welcome into another edition of the 5-Minute Debate. This week, I am joined by none other than Michelle Magdziuk. I
Good
think
job.
you
Yes,
could tell
you
the
did
hesitation
great.
going into it. It was a stressful one. Michelle, for people that don't know who you are, why don't you give them some background on you? Obviously, co-founder, owner of Ball Blast. So, why don't you give them all the deets?
Yeah, owner of Ball Blast Football. You can find all of our information on ballblastfootball.com. We also have a podcast called Ball Blast Football, fantasy football information. And we focus on dynasty and redraft. Once it gets close to the redraft season, we really kind of try to dig in there. But you can find us on iTunes, on Spotify, iHeartRadio, all that good stuff. And then I'm also a researcher at NFL Network. That's my daytime job. So it's been fun so far this off season and last season. But yeah, I'll be headed into my second season with NFL Network this year.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And yeah, I mean, I have to imagine that is a exciting job, especially when a lot of us are just on Twitter for fun for football, and for you, it is a full career. So that's awesome. That's incredible.
But that was me just a year ago. I was not working at NFL Network, and I got my dream job starting in September last year. So I started right on Twitter. I just created Twitter out of nowhere. Wasn't doing anything in the football world. I was like a recruiter for nurses, and then I just built up our brand. And yeah, there you go. So anyone can do it.
No, that's fantastic. That's cool to hear. Obviously, for everybody listening, watching, if you're looking to get into it, I mean, that's all it takes. It's a lot of perseverance and just hoping you get your break. But you're probably here more for the 5-minute debate. So as I'm sure you have seen on the headline or the title, wherever you're watching us, we are debating Cam Akers versus Najee Harris. And rather than doing dynasty, we're getting closer and closer to redraft season. So we're going to put a redraft spin on this, if you will. So Michelle, I got my timer here. I know we got a lot to get into. Let's just jump right in. What do you have on Najee Harris?
So I think the biggest thing that people are concerned about with Najee Harris is the offensive line, right? We expect him to get fed. James Conner, in the games that he played 50% of snaps, like he saw over 15 touches a game in 7 of those 10 games. And we expect Najee Harris to see way more than that. But I'm not as worried about the offensive line. Benny Snell couldn't overcome that line, but James Conner was fine. In those 7 games that he saw more than 15 touches, he averaged 17.1 PPR fantasy points per game. And that's not too small of a sample size. That's more than Joe Mixon averaged last year in his 6 games by a whole point. That's the same amount of points that Nick Chubb averaged fantasy points per game in PPR. So, and I think Najee Harris is a better overall player than James Conner. I think we can all agree with that.
100%.
All they've been talking about this offseason is getting the run game going. That's all the coaches want. That's all the management wants. We have to think that they're going to feed Najee Harris. And, yes, Marquise Pouncey left in retirement. Villanueva went to the Ravens, but those are 2 pieces of offensive line that struggled very hard last year. So I don't think losing them. I don't think losing them is that big of a deal. And they did draft Kendrick Green, who's going to take over to be the center in the 3rd round. And that might seem late to trust the center, but he was one of the best run blocking centers in the FBS last year. He's actually, I'm really excited about him. And I'll let you talk in a second. I have a lot of words here.
I got the itch, yeah.
But I think the biggest thing with this line struggling last year is that the play calling was absolutely atrocious. They ran 200 plays under center last year, 200 plays under center, not in shotgun. And they ran the ball on 171 of those plays, 171 of 200. So what do you think the defenses knew when you went under center? Oh, they're going to run the ball. It's like, of course the offensive line had trouble succeeding against a defense who knew what was going to happen. I mean, I have a million more things for Najee Harris, but I'll let you talk about Cam Akers for a second.
So I would have started off by saying I am a huge Harris fan this year. I don't buy the offensive line concerns either. I'm not worried about it. I'm really not. And this probably doesn't help my point for Cam Akers, but Najee Harris he's a spectacular running back. He's a great all-around running back, and his pass catching is so underrated. But the difference for me between the two of them is I think Cam Akers is just as talented, and I trust the offensive mind of Sean McVay. That for me is the biggest deciding factor. And then when you bring in the changing quarterback from Jared Goff to Matthew Stafford, that has to open up the offense. I mean, just last season and the games Akers played, again, which is a small sample size, he faced the 8th highest stacked front rate, 5th most average defenders in the box, and the offensive line was 52nd in run blocking efficiency. He did as much as he possibly could with what was available to him. And we did see, as he got healthier throughout the season, even going into the playoffs, the role they kind of want him to have. And yes, Henderson is going to be involved. There's no denying. I think he's going to be a phenomenal handcuff this season. But Akers, I mean, if you look at the playoffs, it was just over 232 yards, 2 touchdowns in 2 playoff games. He is going to be a focal point, and I trust McVay to create a scheme that actually works with the offensive line, because it was impossible with Jared Goff last year.
I will say, don't you think going from Jared Goff, though, to Matthew Stafford, they're not going to hand the ball off to Cam Akers 25 times
Right.
like they were doing at the end of last year.
I
And
agree
even
with
those insane touches, he really wasn't doing all that great for fantasy. He had games of 22, 29, and 25 touches, and he averaged 16 PPR fantasy points in those games. Again, that's less than what Connor was averaging when he was just getting 15 touches. And I mean, last year, with his touches overall in the season, he was bottom 5 with fantasy points per touch at 0.67 fantasy points per touch. That's really, really bad. That's bottom 5 with Frank Gore.
Yeah.
He's with Frank Gore, Philip
Lindsay,
Lindsay, Benny Snell, and Josh Kelly. Like, he's in that group. Do you really want those guys for fantasy?
I put a lot of it on Jared Goff, though. I mean, that was the most lost that Goff had ever looked in the NFL, I think, at this point in his career. I mean, he just wasn't a threat, and the offensive line wasn't what it was supposed to be. So I think Stafford should be able to at least help him create space. You can't stack the box against Matt Stafford. That's to me is one of the big things here. Jared Goff, I mean, for what it's worth, kind of had a noodle arm last year. They knew he wasn't going to stretch the defense. So I think Stafford, while he may take some touches away, he should, again, big if, should help that efficiency there.
But I will say, if you look at Akers and Henderson, all their advanced rushing stats, like Henderson beats him by quite a lot in almost every metric. And it's like he was playing behind that same line. And
That's
also
fair.
The Steelers get killed for having all these question marks on their offensive line. It's like the Rams didn't draft offensive line either, and they needed it. They lost their center, Austin Blythe. Like Brian Hill, I think. Brian Allen is going to be their center now. Andrew Whitworth was still very good last year, but he is going to be 40. Like, sooner or later, that line is going to, he's going to lose it. He's 40 years old. And then they did lose their offensive line coach. It's like, we haven't seen Henderson season, and Akers
that might not
together.
Be a bad thing.
Is
it losing the offensive line coach? That might not be a bad thing after last year.
Akers' best game against the Patriots, he did nothing in that game. I'm sorry. That offensive line dominated.
Oh, he was running free. Yeah, he was
wide open holes. So
I loved it. I was on the plane and I was watching that one and I was just thinking, I was like, this is everything I've wanted. And it took us 12 weeks to get here. There are questions on Akers, and there's no denying that. As much as I love to do, there are several questions surrounding what his role is, what Darrell Henderson's role is. That's the big one. That'll be the deciding factor. But I mean, I think this is a debate a lot of people are going to have in their rankings. I mean, so that is the 6.5 minute debate, if you will. And again, just to speak to how closely contested this debate is, we did throw out a poll over on Twitter, 162 votes, and it was 58% Cam Akers, 42% Najee Harris. And in reality, that should be a lot closer. It's not that big of a gap. There's no.
Can I try to sway more people with just this one thing?
Go, all you.
So the Steelers, the one thing that they do, you might be worried about the volume. You know, they didn't run as much last year with Big Ben. They were just a disaster. But the one thing they do always is feed their running backs around the goal line. Benny Snell and James Conner combined for 25 carries inside the 5-yard line last year. To compare to that, Dalvin Cook led the league with 22 carries inside the 5. Like, no other running back is going to get those carries. But like all of those Snell and all of those Connor carries are going to Najee Harris. Benny Snell shouldn't even
100%.
make the team. He's so bad. And we know Najee Harris can get into the end zone. Like he scored 26 rushing touchdowns last year. He is a monster. Like I would not be surprised if he scores double-digit touchdowns last year or next year. Not surprised at all. And the one area where Akers mightily struggled was around the goal line last season. 9 carries inside the 5, only scored once. Henderson had 11 carries inside the 5, scored 4 times. Malcolm Brown, 9 carries, scored 4 times. It's like everyone else on that team could get into the end zone, but Akers couldn't.
Yeah.
We expect that to get better. I think it will get better. But what if it doesn't and he doesn't get the rushing touchdowns? That could be bad.
Yeah. My the only thing for me is he was so raw coming into the NFL. He's such a raw runner just as a whole. So if he doesn't take that leap, it is going to be painful. I mean, the floor for him is much lower than people want to admit, which I hate that I'm even saying that. So that is the 5-minute debate. Michelle, remind everybody where they can find you on Twitter, where they can find the rest of your work and, all that good stuff.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at BallBlastEm, BallBlastEM. Basically, you'll find any of my work there. I post it all there. You'll see the articles I post. Go to ballblastfootball.com to see the work from everyone else on our team. We have just an awesome team of writers that are just killing it over there. And then go find our podcast, wherever you listen to podcasts, Ball Blast Fantasy Football.
All right, everybody. That does it for us here at the 5-minute debate. We will see you guys next week.